Hello and welcome to the Albion Obsessed podcast. You join us for the first episode of 2025. We were a bit remiss in our post-Villa review, so we're going to do a little bit of Villa today. We're going to do a bit of Arsenal. We're going to be talking about the FA Cup, and we're also going to be talking a bit about January and what that holds for Brighton and Hove Albion. This is, of course, a live episode, so send us your thoughts and your questions and we'll chat about them as we go through. But before we dive into our regular scheduled content, let's see who we've got on the show. We've got Joe. Joe, my friend, how are you? You're looking very Brighton clad today. You got a hat. You've got the Night Tech hoodie. Looking very good, my friend.
So basically what I did is I rolled into the club shop and it all just sort of magnetically appeared on my body. I did not spend a fortune on all this stuff. Yes, Tom, I'm feeling good. A lot's happened today. I got my autism assessment and diagnosis. So there you go. Joe's got the tism. Who would have thought? But yeah, no, feeling good, mate. Feeling like a lot of stuff has been lifted. So yeah, ready to talk about football.
That sounds awesome, man. It's really admirable that you've got such a positive spin on the tism, because it can open a lot of things going, oh, that's why. So Spicy Brain Club for the win. We also welcome Ben. Ben, my friend, it's great to finally share the airwaves with you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks. Lovely to virtually meet you too, Tom. Yeah. Had a lovely Christmas and everything like that. It's exciting, optimistic for the new year. So great to be here.
We always need at least one optimistic person on the podcast. It's
That's
normally Dagan and Curtis's job to keep us optimistic. So I'm glad we've got.
I haven't got the stats. I can't, but I've got the optimism.
Well, believe it or not, Ben, before Dagan showed up with all of his stats, I used to be the stat guy, and I don't get me wrong, Dagan does it far better than me. But decent. Welcome, Jason. Thank you for joining us. We are, of course, live, so please pop us your thoughts and your questions, and we're going to dive right into some footballing content. We're going to start off with a quick little recap of the Villa game, Joe, which was the last game of 2024. I know I said beforehand I wasn't looking forward to that game. Obviously, living in the West Midlands with lots of Villa fans surrounding me, I was a bit apprehensive. But generally, the game wasn't too bad. Of course, a 2-2 draw. One of the big talking points for that game was Mitoma being dropped. And Herzler has said that since then, because obviously he didn't start against Arsenal either, that he needs a rest. Obviously, he played for Japan in the internationals, played a lot of football. But Simon Adingra started the game against Villa and got on the score sheet, put us ahead quite early on.
Yeah, I think that game was one of the games that has proven to me just how open and strange the Premier League is this season, because Villa weren't playing overly well. We weren't playing overly well. It's one of those games where we both had spells, and I think there's been a lot of moments like that this season where we've, seen teams not being able to really put full 90s together. Obviously, we make it our own isolated issue, and we think that we should be doing better, and we should be striving for better. I mean, look at what Nottingham Forest are doing this season. That could have been us. So there's a little bit of a spin like that. But I think it just sort of settles that, okay, look, other teams are struggling as much as we are. I mean, this was a Villa team that put 6 past us last season. So, you can forgive us for feeling a little bit negative ahead of that game. Thinking back to, what is Ollie Watkins going to do to us? But I think we handled it relatively okay. Obviously, there was moments where they got their noses in front and scored, and we had to fight back a little bit. And I think in the end we showed really good character to come back and stick in there. And Lamptey scored another goal of the season contender. I mean, who would have thought it? Tarek Lamptey with 2 goal of the season contenders, and it's only January. So I mean, we'll take it. And it was a big sort of result to build on with our other couple of draws that have happened before that. Good to stay in games, and we should have had chances to win it, but that's the Premier League, I guess.
Yeah, it certainly is. And just before I ask you a question, Ben, about Tariq Lamptey. You've just given me, Joe, one of those things where a memory is just unlocked. I distinctly remember sitting on a podcast probably January, maybe 3 years ago, when we talked about our wish list under a certain Mr. Graham Potter. And I believe I put forward the name of a certain striker called Chris Wood, who seems to be banging them in, form of his life. How hindsight, what a wonderful thing. But no, that was like a little memory unlocked for me there. Ben, as Joe said, Tariq Lamptey, he's come back into the squad recently. Joel Veltman's been out injured, along with a lot of other centre-backs, which we will discuss in due course. He came back in. He's looked, he had one really good game where he scored, and then he had an iffy game, if I remember correctly, got pulled off at half-time. But he's popping up with some some really valuable goals at the moment. His contract is out in the summer, I believe. Do you think, with all of his injuries, that it's worth trying to get him to tie down to a new contract, or do you think with Tariq Lamptey, he's been at the club for a while now, hasn't been able to ever string a season together? Is it time that the two part ways?
My first time on this pod for all this time, when you give me a question like that, that's a horrible question. When he's good, he's very, very good. But when he's bad, hang on. So yeah, it's difficult to say, isn't it? Because some people just do seem to have a lot of injuries, and then knowing our luck, we'd let him go, and then he'd be injury free for 10 years. So it's a gamble. It would be a gamble to sort of keep him on, because you might only be getting half a season out of him, but at the same time he does come on, he does some really good stuff. It's funny, he scored 2 goal of the season contenders. A certain other, the fullback on the other side scored a couple of goal of the season contenders last season when he came back from injury, didn't he? So yeah, I really like him. I think he's always seems to be, when he's on a good game, he's never still. He's always moving around. Maybe he hasn't quite got the speed he had before the injury, but he's still quicker than most people in the Premier League. So he does add a lot when he's fit. It's just that gamble, isn't it? Where you think, have we finally fixed him? Because again, Danny Welbeck was similar actually. Danny Welbeck was constantly injured. He'd have half a season out routinely, but now, touching loads of pieces of wood, up until now, who knows in the future, but we've had some really good sort of periods out of him. I would keep him, because I'm quite sentimental anyway. If you listen to the She-Girls podcast, I cry every time a player leaves. So I love him when he's playing, but when he's not playing, sorry, long answer.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, it's because you perfectly articulated the conundrum that is Tariq Lamptey. When he's on form, he's unstoppable, and he terrifies defenders because of his pace, because of his he just wants to get forward, and he can play on the left and he can play on the right. So he's a very versatile defender. But he has those moments where, as I say, I think I can't for the life of me recall which game it was. It was only a couple of weeks ago. It was the game after he scored his first goal, and he was just appalling defensively. So he's one of those players that is a real tough one, because I like him as a human. He seems like a really nice lad.
Yeah.
And I'd be tempted to give him like an extension, like a year extension, and see where we're at, because I think if Herzler does decide to go to like a back three, Lamptey's a wing back. He's there, ready for it, because Veltman's very good at playing that sort of defensive right back role, whereas Lamptey's much more the opposite. He's very good at bombing forward. So Lamptey's a really good late sub potential, but he's also a good wing back option as well. And Ferdy as well. Who knows how long he's going to be out for? Yeah, the Lamptey one's an interesting one. It's good to see some of the comments coming in. Michael said Tariq is a great late sub who can terrify tired defenders like Minte. Lamptey's a tough one. I like him, but he is just so injury prone. Offering Veltman a new deal is a no-brainer for me. Yeah,
Veltman, him too. Yeah,
Veltman has to stay. He's just absolutely brilliant. And Jason says, surely it will come down to him. If he is fit, he will want to play more. But will he get the chances? Maybe a super sub. He doesn't get ahead of some 900,000 player for me. If we go to a back three, I think Veltman would make a really good right-sided centre-back in the back three. And I think Lamptey on the outside of him as a wing-back would just be really nice. It'd be like going back under sort of Graham Potter, back three, Lamptey at wing-back. And that's where I think you'll get the best out of him. So, yeah, be really interesting to see how Hursley sort of progresses. If rumours are to be believed, we've been linked to a young Brazilian centre-back who is much more in the framework of a pacey centre-back, more slight than the towering centre-backs like Lewis Duncan, Van Hecker. So it'd be really interesting to see if that is true and what a sort of acquisition might mean in regards to a change in defensive structure. Joe, before we sort of sign off after Villa, I appreciate it's been quite a quick whiz-bang, whistle-stop talk. There's just one thing I just want to talk about in regards to the Villa game, and that is the penalty. Because it's quite interesting, and I'm going to link this. We can go directly from this into the big talking point of Arsenal, which is, of course, the penalty in the Arsenal game. We gave away a penalty against Villa. At the time, I thought it was quite soft. I thought the referee gave it because there was a previous foul mere minutes before that was probably more likely a penalty. But the penalty that was given, João Pedro follows through. I think it was on Morgan. He follows through with a foot, and the penalty is given after a review. To me, that's strikingly similar to what we saw against Arsenal, but more about that in just a moment. Did you at the time think it was soft? Has what happened at the weekend against Arsenal changed your opinion? Or, where did you fall on the penalty?
It's such a long time ago now. I mean, if you want to talk about follow-throughs on a football pitch, you want to talk to Gary Lineker. I'm not the guy to talk to about that. But sorry, I had to get that one in there. I mean, it's again one of those things where contact's made in the box. If he's not got the ball and he's got the man, you're giving the referee and VAR a decision to make, and the penalties are 9 times out of 10 given. I say 9 times out of 10 is because we don't see the consistency across the Premier League. So many people talk about it that a similar incident may happen next weekend and the penalty won't be given because it will be deemed as not enough contact. So what is enough contact? I mean, for me, the Villa one, whilst you look at it and it might be soft, it's still contact. So I can see why it was given. So I don't think there was many arguments from me. And it's like a balancing act. If a penalty that you think should have been given isn't given, and then one that you don't think is a penalty is given, you sort of like go, well, that's just the universe balancing each circumstance out a little bit if you believe in that stuff. But I think for me there was no complaints, and it was what it was.
That's a very diplomatic view. Ben, do you share that view? Was it a penalty? Was the tackle that happened moments before more of a penalty?
I'm not even sure about that one, but I think it's one of those penalties that probably wouldn't have been given in the days before VAR, because I'm sure in the olden days, Match of the Day would have sort of 10 of those a week or whatever. They'd be analysing. Oh look, João Pedro's clearly kicked him there, and the ref's not seen it. So whatever. So I don't think about soft, but I think unlucky maybe. But it happens. I think it's one of those ones, isn't it? You're annoyed it's given against you, but you think it is if you get it. So I think he was unlucky because they're both swinging at I think they both missed the ball, didn't they? So it's just so happens that he was slightly behind in his sort of empty swinging leg, and contact in the box, as Joe said, it's it's not stone wall, but it's kind of at least a sort of strong fence.
Yeah.
Do you remember one at the AMEX a few seasons ago where Luca Digne for Villa, funnily enough, kicked the bottom of Solly March's foot and it wasn't given as a penalty, and that went to VAR. So
it was the one.
It's the lack of consistency.
Tottenham won a couple of years ago where player. That was where we got. That's where we actually got the apology, didn't we, from PGML?
I remember that.
When
I remember
somebody
that.
trod on Gary Matoma's foot. He did say sorry though, so you know.
Oh yeah, that was one of the few times I think we've ever done, or the quickest we've ever done a turnaround between game and podcast. Because I think after about an hour, we were all
standing in the queue for the train. Going,
yeah, we were absolutely raging. It was literally like, right, pod tonight, let's go. But no, it's as you say, Ben. It's one of those where in the modern day, as soon as a player feels any sort of contact, they are going to go down. They're going to look for a penalty. They know it's going to be reviewed. I think Jason said in the comments here about refs need to be more consistent. We saw a couple of really sort of questionable decisions in other games across the Premier League at the weekend. The Newcastle game with the handball before the lead up before the goal against Spurs. In the Wolves game, I think there was another controversial penalty decision not given as well. I think that's just about what fans want. They just want consistency, and I just don't feel like we're going to get it. And of course, we'll be talking about Arsenal fans, Posy, in just a moment, because we are going to move on to the Arsenal game then, because that is obviously the main game we're here to discuss today. Now, Joe, one of the big things before a ball was even kicked was that Captain Lewis Dunk, who's only recently returned from an injury, didn't make the starting 11, didn't make the bench. His form has been iffy. A lot of fans have questioned whether bringing him in for inform Igor was the right call, but didn't feature against Arsenal. Potentially another layoff for our captain, Joe. Not ideal, form notwithstanding.
No, not ideal, because the man in form, Igor, is now out for a good few months with a hamstring tear. So the luck just continues to roll for the Albion, I guess. I mean, for me, it was, whether it was a forced decision, it was a decision that I was happy with, because, as you say, Igor and JP together have been excellent when called upon at times this season. So it's weird to say, but no, I don't really miss Dunkey in the side. Obviously, I miss his, when he's on form and giving everything, and I miss what he used to be. But the Dunkey from this season, I don't think he's that much of a miss. Don't shoot me.
It's but it's true.
Yeah.
I suppose it's one of those things you have to come to terms with the fact that one of these days, these days, he's not getting any younger, is he?
No, and I think Dagan said it quite well. It's one of those where, like, I think it might have been the Wolves game, and Dunk was obviously missing. And it was one of those games where you felt like maybe if Dunk had been on the pitch, maybe there would have been that leader just to have helped a little bit. But generally speaking, I think even his form last season was a bit iffy. And he seems to be picking up more injuries now than he's ever done. But of course, with age, I say with age as if he's like turning 50. He's he's still in his early 30s. But of course, when you get into that sort of post-30 world as a footballer, you are going to pick up injuries. They are going to take you out for longer. Your recovery time isn't going to be as good. So yeah, the Lewis Dunk of old is gone. The Lewis Dunk of the here and now. His form has been iffy, to put it mildly. But there is still a fantastic captain, a fantastic leader there. I think there was some big question marks, Ben, about whether he should have come straight back in for Igor, who had been in fantastic form. Do you think that the captain's armband alone was enough to sort of get him in over a player that was in decent form?
Yeah, I don't know. It's difficult, isn't it? Captain's kind of, I don't suppose he kind of barged his way in. I think you want your captain on the pitch, don't you? And as you say, he's the cool head that maybe wouldn't have given away that second goal against Wolves. So the swings and roundabouts and stuff. I think what Igor has got, Dunkey hasn't, and what Dunkey's got, Igor hasn't. So again, if we were playing a back three, you'd have Dunkey in between Van Hecker and Igor, and that would be pretty solid. He hasn't got any pace, but he's got presence, and he's got strength in the air and things. But yeah, probably I wouldn't have brought one in for the other. I maybe would have brought him in alongside. But yeah, it's difficult. As you say, I'm older than both of you put together, I think. So Just sitting here like this is giving me a neck injury.
Not another injury. We can't have any more injuries. Yeah, the Lewis Dunk conundrum. It'll be interesting to see how this one plays out. What the rest of the season will look like for him. What cup games will perhaps look like moving forward. We will be covering the Norwich game, Posy, so it'll be a good time to test out some of the youngsters. We'll talk about what our starting 11 may look like a little bit later for the FA Cup game. But Joe, still on Norwich, and I'm glad in a way that still on Norwich, still on Arsenal. So I'm glad in a way that I've brought up Wolves, because with the Wolves game, with the second goal that Wolves scored there, one of the big issues for me was Purvis Estupiñán's positioning. Bearing him obviously with the context of the time, obviously notwithstanding, but his positioning was all over the shop, which left us very open at the back. Very similar situation happened for Arsenal's goal at the weekend. Purvis really high up the pitch. Igor has to come out and meet the Arsenal player, otherwise he's just got the freedom of that side of the pitch. So some people I know were bemoaning about Igor, and I think fair enough, but he's being dragged out of position because Purvis is gone. He's vacated the side. So, Igor had to go out onto that left-hand side to meet the player. And obviously we're so open on that left-hand side. Van Hecker sort of left in no man's land, and Arsenal managed to score. A bit of a calamity of errors. I thought, Purvis, Igor, Van Hecker and Verbruggen, none of them sort of covered themselves in glory. You were there on the day. What did that look like for you in the stands?
It looked like an Arsenal player running towards goal and panic stations assumed the north stand, basically. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the way that obviously Hertzler wants to play. And I know we've spoken in private, Tom, about tactical setup and what shape that we've seen, or football identity we're seeing from Hertzler. One thing that we do know is that he does like his fullbacks to push high. And I think that's just a risk that you take, maybe a silly risk to take against an Arsenal team with pace on the wings, especially Ethan Nwaneri, who's had a fantastic season up until now. Has been one of those players that's just burst onto the scene and taken his opportunity whilst Bukayo Saka's been out. So obviously we do have to give some credit to him and the abilities that he poses, and it was a relatively tame finish, and you would expect Verbruggen to do a bit better, but he's had the shot, he's bought the ticket, and he's won the goal lottery. So just frustrating on our part that we've had to sort of scramble defensively because of high fullbacks, but it's a risk you take when you play the way that Hertzler wants to play, and especially when you've got, I mean, Igor's got enough pace, but I don't think enough pace to keep up with pacey wingers and JP. He's got long legs, bless him, and he's trying to slide in to block the shot, but yeah, it's too much, too little, too late. So just one of those really frustrating goals where if you put 100% into attacking against a team like Arsenal, they're going to punish you, and that's the brutal nature of the Premier League.
It certainly is, and I think you are right, Joe. I think pushing new fullbacks up high is part of the modern game. We've seen it for a number of years now. I know that the new trend is obviously to invert them into the midfield as well. My one thing, just tactically, I think if you're going to play Purvis that high up, you've got to play him with a back three, because or your holding midfielder, which is supposed to be Baleba, needs to just sit, and that's where Caicedo was so good, because he would sit and then he had the pace, he had the legs to get back and put those last ditch tackles in. I think that with the profile of Carlos Baleba, he's more of a box-to-box sort of number 8, if you will. So we just don't have that midfielder that's going to sit in front of the back four to allow Purvis to make those runs. So again, perhaps it's one of those things where we might see a back three with Purvis as more of a wing back option. I have noticed during Dunk's injury, Igor did a really good job, to be fair to him, of covering Purvis's runs forward, and I thought he did a really good job. Obviously, that's not always going to work, and we saw against Arsenal, Ben, on this occasion. It didn't work. Really high wing backs, as Joe says. But again, do you think Verbruggen could have done a little bit better? Is there anything else that the defence could have done to stop that Arsenal goal?
Yeah, I mean, Bart Verbruggen wouldn't be very pleased with himself, will he? But otherwise, I mean, I don't know. I think you could sort of see, obviously, Joe watching it from the North Stand wouldn't have quite got this. Well, he might have got this similar thing, but it was almost as soon as Arsenal got the ball back, there was like, we almost had a back three, but it was kind of over there. We had a right back and two centre backs, and then nothing. And there was just this enormous. And you thought, well, as soon as a player runs into that, they're in on goal. And as you say, the Van Heck is not slow for a centre back, but he's not quick, and he's facing his own goal. I think he did as well as he could, really. But like you say, you leave that amount of space behind yourselves, especially with obviously the defence wasn't up in a line or anything, so there was just this chunk of sort of empty grass. Fall into that, pacing into it, 1-0. It's I think, as you say, I think a back three, but especially when you haven't got pace in your centre backs, a back three is what you have to play if you're going to have wing backs. You can't have a back four with two wing backs. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I think the balance of playing Purvis and Veltman gives you a little bit more of a balance, but 100%. I know some people might say, well, but you can't play a back three with three slow centre backs, but it's about how you utilise your defensive line, isn't it?
And they cover the spaces and
exactly. And I think
the thing is, Tom, you say like you can't play Veltman and like adapt to a back three at the time. I think you can. I think it just takes a lot of like organisation for Veltman or the back line to realise, well, Purvis is pushed high. Then you need one of your attacking midfielders, whether that be, I don't know, whoever at the time, Gruder, whoever, to come out into that right wing back spot and then shift it over a little bit. But it's hard to do that in the click of a finger when Arsenal launch a counter attack. I understand.
Who would have? I think you are right, Joe. Because obviously, what makes a good team is your ability to transition between shapes within a game. Do you know who'd be really good on the right hand side in a situation like that? Solly March.
Yeah, right. That'd be nice. We'll talk about Solly as we come to the Norwich game. But
to drag us over to the women's team, that's something that they do. Is they have a back three of sort of Guru Bergsvand is kind of the female Lewis Dunk, and then you've got Maria Torres-Dottir and Geraldine Carabali either side of her, and they're a back three. But then you've got Poppy Pattinson as a left wing back, and someone like Rachel McLaughlin, it hasn't been all season, as a right wing back. And when they need to, they just sort of move like that. So one of the wing backs goes forward, and so the others sort of slot across. And, they both, if they can, they both go forward, and they've just got the three at the back. But if they need to, one of them will come back and become a fullback, and the other three will sort of shift over, and it sort of works both ways. It's quite clever. So maybe Fabian should have a word with Dario.
Maybe they play enough paddleball together, don't they? So
but you're right. It's about the players need to shift in that space, and I think like Baleba and Ayari for me, if you're going to get your left-sided fullback bombing on, then Baleba has to have that discipline.
The thing is, Hertzler himself said that Carlos could fill in at left back if needs be. So why is there not that instruction that, okay, Carlos, if you see Purvis bombing on, it's your job to cover that empty space. But then again, then you lose the excellence of Carlos Baleba in an attacking sense. Because whilst Caicedo was brilliant defensively, and we make all these comparisons, Baleba's got that little bit more creativity going forward as well. And dare I say, it can shoot a little bit better than what Caicedo could. I know Caicedo scored a few. Did he score a few or one?
I think Baleba's just more of a dynamic midfielder, isn't it? I do think it's worth mentioning here as well. I mean, I'm being quite harsh here, and I'm trying to act like I've got like all the necessary coaching badges. I've only got a few, and it's not as high as Fabian Herzler's. Maybe this is my last little point on the subject. Maybe this is where a partnership of Belaber and Vifer would be better, because I think we know that Belaber wants to go up and down, up and down, up and down. It's like a yo-yo. But Ayari is very similar. Ayari doesn't have that sort of defensive part of his game, perhaps like Matt Vifer does. So maybe that's the partnership that going forward, or Gomez, someone who's got that bit more oomph about him.
God forbid that you have an actual opinion on tactics without having the necessary coaching badges. That's just ridiculous.
If someone wants to pay the several £1,000s for my next UEFA badge, that would be absolutely lovely. But we digress. Arsenal went 1-0 up, and then they spent the rest of the game time wasting. I thought that was a bit of a credit to Brighton in a way. Mighty Arsenal, challenging for the title, had to come to little old Brighton and waste that much time. I bet all the Arsenal fans who were so eager to criticise the officials after the game, I bet they were also really up in arms about how bad their team were time wasting and how little the ref and the officials seemed to be doing about it. I bet they were just as angry about
It's funny, actually, it started about 16 minutes into the first half. But then it stopped about 16 minutes into the second half. I don't know,
Funny that, isn't it? Yeah, it is.
Someone on Twitter timed it from the 22nd minute of how much Arsenal were wasting time. They'd sat there from the 22nd minute to the 45th, and they posted this at half time. Arsenal didn't have the ball in play for 8.5 minutes.
And I bet the Arsenal fans were absolutely outraged when the referee did not give that time back as added on time. Because, because Arsenal fans, they've got this massive victim mentality. They must be really angry that the referee didn't give them that time back. Oh, officials, man. Obviously, we're poking fun at the Arsenal fans because of what happened in the second half. And it's quite, in a way, I'm quite glad we've talked about the Villa game, because for me, Joe, the big talking point about the game is the penalty. It's all I've been seeing on Facebook and less so on Blue Sky. A lot of people, pundits, talking about it on TalkSport, on Match of the Day. Very few pundits. I think Alan Shearer is the only one who I've seen come out and say it was a penalty. Everyone else seems to be adamant that it's not. So let's just sort of like a bit of a blow-by-blow account for this. So Brian have got the ball. João Pedro's made his way into the box. He flicks it up and he nods it on. But as he does nod it on, here's me nodding it on. Here's Saliba's head. This is the Greek philosopher Socrates. But for this demonstration, he is going to be Saliba. So I've nodded the ball, and then out of nowhere, doosh! I've been headbutted. Now, if that was a foot, if it was foot on foot, no one would be saying anything. It would be a follow through, mistimed tackle, whatever. But because it's a head, again, douche, Arsenal fans seem to think that's okay. So, Joe, is headbutting now an acceptable form of thing, a way to get the ball or attempt to get the ball?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to our very own Mr. Stevens on the old WhatsApp during or after the fact, and I said, how entertaining would a game of football be if we could just tackle with our heads? And we've come up with a plan to only watch football with tackling for heads as a goal, which would be quite funny. I mean, that demonstration, Tom, was absolutely fantastic. I urge anyone listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts to go over to our YouTube channel, skip to about 34 minutes and watch that.
You don't even need to see the actual game footage now, because you've seen that.
It was so accurate. Oh man, I mean, yeah, I posted as much after the game, Tom, and said, like, if that was João Pedro's foot kicking the ball onwards and Saliba's foot came and made contact with João Pedro's foot, it would be a penalty. A lot of people are saying it's a head 50-50, drop balls are given for that. Saliba literally looks at Pedro and headbutts him. There is no doubt in my mind that, I mean, Does the ball hit Saliba's head? Yeah, because Pedro heads it onwards to him. So again, he doesn't get to the ball first. Pedro does. Contact's made in the box. It's a foul. Simple.
Yeah. One of the defining things that I've seen that seems to be some sort of defense is that he attempted to play the ball and that he's touched the ball. I urge the people that think that those two things are justifiable reasons to headbutt someone. I urge them to read the rules of the game, because it will make the game just a lot clearer for them. Because it doesn't matter if you attempt to play the ball. Most tackles that are fouls are players attempting to play the ball. Doesn't matter. Getting the ball first also doesn't matter. That's not a thing. That's a thing that used to be a thing back in the 80s and the 90s. But it's not a thing anymore. If you follow through and commit a foul, it doesn't matter if you touch the ball first. Read the rule book. God, if you're going to moan about the officials, read the damn rules, man. Doom has mentioned in the comments about the penalty that we gave against Arsenal last season with Lamptey, because Lamptey also won the ball on a tackle and followed through and gave away a penalty. I remember at the time last year, I think I'm right in saying that I very much held my hands up and went, yeah, that was the penalty. But I bet Arsenal fans weren't going, oh, but he's played the ball. He's attempted to play the ball. That couldn't have been a penalty. I bet they weren't saying that then, were they? It's almost like they're a bit inconsistent with how they want to apply the rules of the game. Yeah, the Arsenal meltdown, Ben, has been absolutely hilarious.
It has. Yeah, I mean, as you said, any other part of the body, because I mean, I don't think anyone is accusing William Saliba of deliberately headbutting him, but he misses the ball. I mean, the ball does brush his head, but he basically goes in for the ball. João Pedro beats him to it, and he headbutts João Pedro instead. It's exactly the same as a ball rolling along the ground. They both go for it. João Pedro gets there first. Saliba wipes him out. There's no difference. I think people are there was a sort of weird thing on Match of the Day with Gary Lineker and was it Micah Richards and Danny Murphy going, oh, I don't think fans don't want to see these given. So well, they do. If their players are being headbutted, accidental or otherwise, they're being fouled in the box. So yeah, it was really again strange that they. I've got a lot of Arsenal fans, friends, but they're very nice people. But there does seem to be this really weird victim mentality, doesn't there? They're almost as bad as Man U fans actually these days. That every time they don't win, it's because this list of things the ref didn't do or did do. And it's like nothing to do with the fact that they were 1-0 up and then decided to play the game out for the next sort of 74 minutes. And yeah, it's yeah.
I wonder which referee's fault that current scoreline is. Because it can't be because Newcastle are playing better than them. I don't actually know that true or not. But no, it's got to be the referee. Because don't you know that one time Declan Rice got a second yellow card for kicking the ball away, and then Trossard got a second yellow card for kicking the ball away, and it's the officials that are just not fair.
Yeah, it is weird. I mean, I think there comes that level of expectation, doesn't there? When you're a club that's routinely finishing in the sort of top 3 or 4 positions in the, Arsenal have got a great history of winning the double. They won the league. I can't remember the last time they won the league. It was a while ago now, wasn't it? But they won the league quite a few times, cups, etc., and they're routinely used to winning things. And suddenly they're kind of not quite. If they were down like where Tottenham are, I mean they're loving where Tottenham are, but then they'd sort of, it was like maybe things aren't, maybe we're not doing quite what we should be doing or whatever. But because they're up there and they're almost making it, and they're all, they're above Man City and they're sort of fighting for second place, and they want to keep in touch with Liverpool. And so it must be something that everybody else is against them to try and stop them from doing this. No, guys. Just play slightly better and score more goals than the opposition does. It's, simple game.
Simple game football.
It is really. I think it's Arteta. Like, if I'm being brutally honest, I know this isn't a Brighton podcast, but I think it's Arteta. I think he's gone full on Mourinho. You know how Mourinho used to be
Mm.
when he was at Chelsea, score a goal, sit back, park the bus. And that's
Yeah.
basically how
Well,
Chelsea
I
won
mean,
the
that
Premier League. And he's
it
doing
comes
it
down
after-
from the manager.
Yeah.
Anything like that comes. He. I mean, if he didn't like it, they'd get to training on Monday morning and say, right, guys, I want you. Well, as soon as we've scored, I want you to keep going and try and score another one. He's the one that's calling the shots, and he's the one that's saying, take 10 minutes to take each goal kick, and take 15 minutes to take each corner.
Exactly.
So
it's as Pozzi's just said, it's the tactics. It's not the referees, it's not the officials, it's the tactics. As you say, Ben, it's the game. They've gone, right, we've gone 1-0 up. Instead of saying, right, we're going to go for another one, or we're going to keep it tight for half time, then we're going to come out second half, we're going to go for another one. It was just, we're going to waste time. And they didn't really have that much more opportunities that I can recall. They kind of almost scored from a corner, kind of almost. It hit the post. And then they had a few opportunities from corners where they looked dangerous, as Arsenal have done this season. But I don't remember them being all that threatening. I remember there was one moment where Bart Verbruggen almost gave me a blooming heart attack. Was it Jesus that was bearing down on him? He gives him this little bit of skill, and I was like, oh my god.
yeah, that was
but
good.
apart from that, I don't remember them being all that threatening.
No.
And
I mean, set pieces.
Yeah, they're just a set piece merchant, that team at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, we just look at our XG was 1.56. Theirs was 0.84. So we should have won it, but they're moaning about.
Yeah, well, that's just Arsenal fans. I think, as Rodgers was just arrogant and delusional. Joe, second half. We've talked a lot this season about Brighton's inability to string a game together, the whole game, and I'm not asking for full 90 minutes of complete and total domination. But what we've seen very much this season has been one half tends to be quite poor, the other half tends to be quite good. The second half against Arsenal was a lot better. We made good changes at halftime. We brought Matoma on, and I think was it Minte? Did Minte come on at halftime or a bit later? No, it was Jorginho. Thank you. He came on for Matt O'Reilly. The changes were positive. That's been a criticism leveled at Hurstler. Late substitutions, too late in games to impact. But good substitutions. And the second half was a lot more positive. As Ben sort of said, we had a better XG. There was a moment in the second half where Veltman does this lovely little chip over to Minte, and then Minte puts the ball across, whether it was a shot or a cross to Matoma at the back post. I'm not quite sure. But we did look like the better team in the second half. What do we need to do, Joe, to string this 90 minutes together?
Oh, man.
Come on, Joe. You tell us. You need to tell us how we're going to string 90 minutes together.
I mean, it's all a mentality thing, isn't it? It's about believing in yourself that you can perform like that for 90 minutes. And I think we've shown it enough this season to have that belief in ourselves. And I know there's been some really crap moments mentally for us. And we've spoken on the last podcast about fans, Albion Mojo and stuff like that. But I think it comes from not seeing a team realize their potential. And yeah, I mean, a little bit more patience is needed. I think we do need to realize of how inexperienced this team is without the likes of now Lewis Dunk, James Milner, sometimes Joel Veltman, no Danny Welbeck, and stuff like that. There's a lot of good senior figureheads that we're sort of missing on the pitch at the moment. So it's a game of patience and just hoping that the players start to believe that they can go out from minute one. And if they end the first half really well, why can't they come out into the second half and continue to do the same? It's the same game of football in the first half and the second half. So they just need to realize their potential and just be a little bit stronger mentally. And I think that comes from the manager as well, which is what we're asking for. So yeah, that's what I think we need to do.
I do think you raised two good points there, Joe. First one is about, I think the average age of the squad is it's like 23, 24. It's a very young squad, especially as you say, with all the injuries currently to senior players, one of which we'll talk about in just a moment. And then the other thing to talk about is Hursley. He's not an inexperienced manager in terms of how many years he's been in the game, but obviously he's still a very young coach, and it must be difficult to coach players that are older than you. That must be difficult. So I think the club bringing in the new assistant, whose name I can't remember, apologies for that, bringing him in, I think is going to be a really, really shrewd bit of business. I think he's worked at the German FA before, and I think he's been brought in not just to help Hursley, but also to help coaches progress in their careers as well. So it's really nice to see that they've got this pathway idea where they can train young coaches to go up through the ranks at Brighton and then on to other clubs. Obviously, we've seen over the last fortnight or so Inigo Calderon taking up the job at Bristol Rovers in League One after being our under-18s coach, which was absolutely fantastic. We've seen people like Gary Dicker move on to the MLS, where he's gone to be a coach over there. So it's really nice that the club are putting in sort of a pathway for coaches now, not just players, but coaches. So the coaches can go off and do, more in their coaching career. And I think that's a really good bit of business. So yeah, some really good observations there, Joe. And then Ben, just one last thing we haven't discussed is the return of Adam Webster. Igor went off injured, and it's since been revealed that he's going to be out for quite a while with a hamstring tear. With Adam Webster, I really like Adam Webster. Again, like Tarek Lamptey, as a human, I think Adam Webster comes across as a real top guy, top bloke. But on the pitch, you never know what you're going to get. You're either going to get prime Maldini, or you're going to get like Frank from Pub League Division 3. So having him come on for Igor and play as well as he did against Arsenal was a credit to him as a professional and him as a human being. I thought he was absolutely excellent when he came on. What did you make of his late performance?
Yeah, it was prime Maldini, wasn't it? Well, maybe, but yeah, he knows, doesn't he? He knows that he's like the fifth choice centre back or whatever, and he knows he's the guy sitting on the bench just in case Donkey or Igor gets injured. But credit to the guy, he came on and he stood up, didn't he? And he had, one of the best performances of the last few years. But as you say, he's a great guy. And I remember talk of sort of, oh, should we keep him on? Should we let him go? And again, as I said, I cry when players leave, because he's a lovely guy, and it's great to see lovely guys coming on and doing their job so well. So yeah, fair play. And and we're going to need him, aren't we? We're going to need him to continue to be prime Maldini over the next few games, because he's all we've got, unless we sort of start going to Uncle Tony's wallet again.
Yes, we will discuss Uncle Tony's wallet. Yeah, I'm really, really happy for Adam Webster. I just really hope that he can get in a bit of form. Not your wallet, Joe. We need Uncle Tony's. Because when Webster is in form, I genuinely think he looks mustard. I remember, again, I know I'm going back, but I remember it was probably 2020, 2021. He had a run of games and he looked absolutely fantastic, and he was being touted for England. And then he got injured. And I think that's just the thing with Adam Webster. He just picks up these niggly little injuries that keep him out for a while. And then he struggles to get back into the swing of things. And then he comes back, has a game where he makes a mistake or two mistakes, and then he picks up another little niggly injury. It's been really hard for him to sort of put a consistent run together. But as I say, we know there's a player in there. And he's a great leader off the pitch. I don't think I've heard a single coach, Potter, De Zerbi, Hursley, say a bad word about him. So I really hope that we can sort of nurse Adam Webster through the next run of games to sort of cover our defensive frailties at the moment with Duncan Igor out. So it's going to be an interesting one. Joe, let's look ahead now. We've looked behind us. Let's look ahead to the game against Norwich, the FA Cup. it's no secret that we've got quite a few injuries. So this was one of the comments I starred earlier from Posy. Will the Norwich game be a good time to test out one or two youngsters, particularly in defence? We've seen young, I think is it McConville? He's been named on the bench a couple of times over the last sort of month or so. Do you think this is an opportunity to blood in some youngsters, or would you like us to go as strong as possible?
I mean, I'd like to see McConville for one. I think he's got a lot of plaudits already about how he's integrated with the senior group and how good he's been. I mean, he got his first ever Northern Ireland senior call up as well. So there's definitely a big player in there for sure. I don't know if you guys saw the clip from last week of McConville in training. A cross came in and he was defending and he sort of chested it onto the goalkeeper for them to catch it. So he's got a Lewis Dunk in there as well. So if he's been learning off of Dunkey and can be a younger up and coming Lewis Dunk and take the baton, if you like, from him, and hopefully we can see a positive performance. And whether he's called upon because of forced injuries, he's got to take his opportunity when it comes to him, and I'm sure he will. I'm sure he's eager and waiting to go. Having said that, I would like to see him. I think I would like to see as much strength as possible just to get the job done. I mean, it's a weekend game, so we've got a week in between fixtures. I think Ipswich comes quite soon after, actually, so we might see that taken into account. But obviously, we've had a week from then until the Norwich game, so I think I would like to see probably Jason Steele, and then Lamptey, McConville, Van Hecker, and let's go Stupinian because I can't think of who else can play there.
I was going to go for Amari Samuels. Played left back for our under-21s. He's been on the bench. He was on the bench a couple of times under De Zerbi. I think he did I think he went out on loan at some point last season as well. I think with Purvis, I think he could probably do with a break personally. Yeah.
Amari Samuels was fantastic for me on Football Manager. I had a massive injury crisis on Football Manager. Barco was out on loan. I couldn't recall him. And so I played Amari Samuel there, and he scored and assisted for days from left back. So, if Football Manager knows anything, why not? Probably ahead of them, I'd like to see maybe Diego Gomez if he's ready, alongside Carlos Baleba. Ahead of them, I would like... I don't think Solly's ready to start. I think he'll come on for half an hour, 20 minutes at the end if we're sort of like a comfortable score up. But I don't want to, write Norwich off because FA Cup magic and all that. So let's go with Mitoma, Rutter, and Minter. I think Minter needs to start again, and then leading the line would be João Pedro. So nice and strong going forward. Yeah. But I think Rory McConville, I think, deserves his chance, and why not give it to him now?
Fair, and that's a nice strong lineup. Ben, would you go as strong as Joe? Would you put in a few more fringe players under 21s? How would you go?
It's specific lineups. I can't disagree with anything really Joe said. I think you can't take them too lightly, and I think you'd almost want to put your strongest 11 out and try and break them early, and then bring the kids on. I mean, that's the so I'd stack the bench full of academy players, sort of De La Faya, Campepion, guys like that maybe. And just try and smash through them, get sort of 2-3 goals, and then bring the kids on to give the old guys a rest. But yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because Norwich aren't terrible. It's not like we've been drawn against a sort of non-league type team or anything like that. I can't exactly remember where they're sort of top half the championship, aren't they?
Yeah.
So so that they're not going to be a pushover. So yeah, I mean, I think we've got to, as you say, there's some of the kids coming in certain positions, but I think we've got to go as strong as possible. And then maybe play around with a few, bring Solly on towards the end. I think maybe give 3 or 4 minutes to Evan Ferguson, whether he's fit or not, just so that if West Ham do take him away, then he's cup tied. But yeah, I mean, I think looking at the table at the moment, we're 10th. There's not many points between 10th and 5th, but I suppose a good second half of the season we might push for the Europa League or Europa Conference, but it'd be nice to get a cup run. So we bowed out of the League Cup very early, so it'd be nice to sort of properly take it seriously, really. So the important thing is to get the job done. Almost, no, not I was going to say almost more than beating Ipswich the week after, but as important, I think, as beating Ipswich the week after is to get Norwich out of the way.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a reunion with Mr. Shane Duffy as well, which will be nice.
Ain't nobody. Yeah, I'm kind of torn because I love the FA Cup. Have done since I was, I would say a teenager. And we have over recent seasons done really well in the FA Cup. Obviously, 2 semi-finals, nothing to be sniffed at. I would probably go with a bit more of a mix. I'd probably rest players like Purvis, Baleba. I'd probably Steele in goal, Lamptey, Van Hecker, McConville. I'd probably play Amari Samuels at left back just to see what he's about. See what he can do. Then I'd probably play more of the fringe players, maybe like Enciso, Adingra. Maybe give Minter a start just to. I know Minter's not a fringe player, but obviously he's been injured. I'd be tempted to start Gomez if he's ready. I'd also give minutes to players maybe returning from injury like Hinchelwood if, again, he's ready. March, I'd give him some minutes. For me, the big question mark comes about up top because João Pedro probably could do with the rest. Again, he's nursed injuries so far this season, so I probably would be reluctant to start Pedro. But we don't really have any other strikers. I would still argue that Pedro is more of a 10 than a 9. So Ferguson, is he fit? Ferguson is one of the questions I've started for our Q&A at the end. So it's just an interesting one about how strong we're going to go. I'll tell you who I would like to see. There's a player who plays for the under-21s, Harry Howell, who's cousin of Hinchelwood. The lad seems to be scoring for fun for the under-21s. And every time I've watched like the highlights or when the club have streamed their games on Twitter, he's just been a standout player. He looks excellent. I think he's only like 16, so he's still a really young lad. But he looks really promising. So again, I wouldn't mind seeing him on the bench. As you say, Ben, stack it with some of the academy lads, get the job done perhaps as early as possible. Norwich aren't going to be pushovers.
Adela Fire's out on loan, isn't he?
Yeah, Blackpool.
So that one.
He's doing really well at Blackpool, apparently. Blackpool fans have been raging about how good Adela Fire is.
They're not keeping him.
No. But I remember Adela Fire came on against West Brom in the Cup, didn't he, Joe? I don't know if you remember this a couple of seasons ago. He looked brilliant.
It's one thing I was going to mention, Tom. It's our 3-year anniversary. 4-year anniversary. 3-year anniversary. Oh, we're so cute, aren't we?
The FA Cup is a great opportunity to play some of these young lads. Because, I know a lot of fans will go, no, go strong, take it seriously. And I'm all about taking it seriously. I'm not saying play the under-21s. But if we didn't give minutes to Jack Hinchelwood, we would never have found out how good Jack Hinchelwood is. So I'm eager to see people like Harry Howell, just because I want to see what he can do in the first team setup. It might be too soon for him, but he'd be sort of one player that I'd be looking for on the bench. But no, go strong, as strong as you can. Give fringe players a minutes for me. See the job out in the first hour or so. Bring on some of the kids. give them some minutes. So no, that'd be my thoughts.
Yeah.
As we close in on the hour, Joe, really quickly, January is the month we are currently residing in. Barber has said that he hopes for a quiet January. I certainly don't hope for a quiet January because I believe that we could do with a few more defenders. I'm not asking for much, Joe. I just want Uncle Tony to buy us a defender or two, or even just one defender and then get another defender on loan. For your January wish list, Joe, is there anything you would like to see Uncle Tony bring us?
January is such a difficult transfer window, isn't it? We know how Barber and Bloom feel about January. So I certainly don't think we'll see any high-profile departures. I think that was made clear with the Caicedo situation last season, that even if £100 million is being waved under our nose, we will not be moved until we decide to sell. So it's so difficult, especially after spending 200+ million of Uncle Tony's money in the summer, to want more. And I think maybe it's made fans a little bit like, well, you splashed the cash then, why can't you splash the cash now when we really need it? And of course, it would be an opportunity missed if we don't strengthen and we see a run of results that certainly aren't favourable. I think we had it last season as well, where we saw an opportunity maybe to invest, and there was a little bit of resistance from
a bit of resistance, Joe. That's a nice way of putting it.
I know. There was a communication or relationship breakdown between a certain Italian and Mr. Barber and Mr. Bloom. So, I mean, now and the present is always the time to improve this squad. And I don't want to sound like a Brighton Hove Albion board yes man, but we will only make moves if it's financially viable and makes sense at the time. I don't think we're going to be pushed to pay a price that we don't want to pay for a player. It's been said that Vitor Reis is available for £25 million. We've bid 23.5. So it's only a little bit extra.
That's classic Brighton, though. We'll give you 23.5. It's 25 million, mate. No, it's not for us.
But apparently, according to Charlie Parker Turner, I think his name is, we are ready and waiting to make another bid. So hopefully that comes off and we get a nice young centre back in who is hopefully ready. I've seen Rodders, as just mentioned, Fikayo Tomori has probably been told that he's available to move, but he did play in their final the other day and looked rather happy and celebrating with Tammy Abraham. So whether he can be moved in January is another thing. His wages might be an issue for us. But again, as you said, Tom, is maybe a loan option. But yeah, we'll see what happens. But January for me is always a write-off. I don't think we'll make many additions, if any.
No, you're right, Joe. I think considering we didn't make any last year and we were in the last 16 of Europe and our squad was injury ravaged and we didn't make a single signing that I can recall. Yeah. I really hope that we bring in at least one defender. Michael is just saying, Reis is young. Yeah, he is. We probably, in an ideal world, wouldn't if he did come to the club, we probably wouldn't throw him into the mix so soon. But with obviously Dunk being perpetually injured this season, Webster being out routinely, I know he's back at the moment. Veltman's been up and down with injury for the last season and a bit as well. Eagles could be gone for the rest of the season. We don't know. We are very thin on the ground defensively.
Yeah,
so
it looks like Kadioglu's also out for maybe 3-4 months.
Yeah, so
I know that's not a centre back, but still a defensive option, which is
I mean, our defensive line is riddled with players that are unfortunately quite prone to injury. Lamptey, Tick, Veltman over the last season and a bit, Tick, Dunk last season a bit, Tick, Webster.
I'll tell you what, Tom, this new medical team are working absolute wonders.
I don't know if it's the training, if it's I don't even know what it is, because you can't say Ferdy, for instance, is workload, because he came over, played 2 games, and then went out injured. I've for a toe injury. I don't know. I'm not going to pin all the blame on the medical team, and I'm not saying that's what you were doing, Joe. It is a very
Maybe I was.
manage. Maybe he is. But I think it's fair to say we need a defender. So Ben, just over to you then. You've sort of mentioned a young Evan Ferguson, rumoured to be going everywhere under the sun at the moment. Evan Ferguson's a funny one. Another one, very injury prone. Has a string of games, scores a wonder goal, and then disappears for a year. Sounds horribly familiar and very similar to another young Irish striker.
Don't do it, Tom. Don't do it.
Hey, I didn't. At least I didn't mention that we once let Victor Gyökeres
go. No. But if anyone ever mentions Victor Gyökeres' name to me ever again, I will headbutt them like Saliba.
Ben, did you know that we once sold Victor Gyökeres for Coventry for £1 million?
Yeah, but he just disappeared. I've not heard anything about him since. I mean, he just disappeared, didn't he?
Hiding behind the mask. But no, Ben, where do you stand on January? Do you think we'll see any business done in or out?
I mean, I don't think we'll see much, as you say, because it's. I mean, traditionally, Uncle Tony does keep the purse strings quite tight this time of year, because it's the time of year when panic buys are made, isn't it? And so people spend 4 times the price on someone who's 2 times as good, kind of thing. So yeah, I think we do need a centre back. Just checking the squad out, and we've actually only got 2 at the moment. And one of those is Webbo. So if he does get another knock again, then we've got JP basically just standing there going, no.
One at the back.
But 1-5-3. There's one left. So yeah, I mean, I think that unless like Rory McConville can come up, prove himself at Norwich, and then they go, ooh, we've just found the latest sort of teenage sensation, then they do need to find somebody, I think, just to even if it is literally just a loan for the second half of the season.
But McConville is South American, Ben. What's going on here?
That's true.
It's from our other production line, which is the Republic of Ireland. Northern Ireland.
Yeah. Otherwise, I mean, there's not really. I think we have to come back to what Joe said earlier on, that what you said as well, Tom, that the average age of this team is just kindergarten, isn't it? So there's a process as we're so fond of hearing. So I think the back needs shoring up, but the front 2/3 is pretty good. It just needs just something. I don't know. I can't really see any sort of definite gaps. I think there's just a little bit of inconsistency that needs ironing out. Like we were saying about why didn't Carlos Baleba slot in behind Purvis when he went forward? It's because Carlos Baleba's like 15. So he's inexperienced. He's still a rough diamond. We're polishing him, and so I think I don't want to say this is going to be a transition season, because I think you look at the umpteen games we've drawn over the last few months. So many of those points you can say we threw away. What are we looking at there? Is the Arsenal 2-0 down now? Oh, that ref, man. But we should have been beating a lot of those teams. But I think it was a hard-fought point against Villa, and it was and we got a draw against Arsenal, who are challenging for the title. So I wouldn't put those in the same bracket as like drawing with Wolves or drawing with Leicester. So I think there's I'm the optimistic guy. I think there's a corner been turned. So shore up the back a bit, but then I think we're good.
Yeah,
I think they're quite a good
I
team.
agree.
Tom, one thing I would do maybe as well, thinking about January, is I would, if I was Tony Bloom, waive some sum of money under PSV's noses for Olivier Buscagli and say, look, he's leaving you for free in the summer. He's probably going to come to us anyway. Here's 12, 15 million euros.
And I'd be like, and would you also like one of our attacking players on loan to sweeten the deal? Because we've got a plethora of attackers, as you say, Ben. We've got loads of them. We can't keep them all happy. But yeah, because as you say, Joe, I think we were linked to him in the summer. We didn't get that particular deal over the line, which is fine. These things happen, but it has left us in a bit of an injury crisis at the back. I think, as you say, Ben, it just needs to be shored up a bit. It doesn't need a huge shake. It just needs a bit of shoring up to make sure that, when Adam Webster, sorry, Adam, if you're watching, does inevitably get injured again, we've got people in, because as I say, we know Igor's probably not going to be with us for a while, and JP can't do it all by himself. So yeah, just a centre back, maybe one permanent, one loan. Even if we could get Tomori on loan, I mean, that would be brilliant. He's been at the club before. We've come a long way since then, of course, but he knows the club. He knows what we're about. So hopefully, if that door did open, that would be a nice little thing there. So I've started a couple of questions. If you've got any more questions, viewers, please do drop them in the comments box and we'll go through a few of them now. First one I'm going to throw at you, Joe, and this is your view on Ferguson. Now, Jason, I know you asked this over an hour ago now, but I did say we'd come back to it. Ferguson has been injured, Joe, but even when he's not been injured, even with the injury to Welbeck, he's still not been chosen to play as our number 9. He's looked horribly out of form when he has played. What would you do with Evan Ferguson? There are so many rumours circulating that he could go out on loan to other Premier League clubs or even leave on a permanent deal. Before I give my view on it, Joe, because I know as the host you're not really supposed to have an opinion. But what would you do, Joe, with Evan Ferguson? Injury, regardless of an injury.
Okay, so first of all, I want to, and I know you meant it in a jokey way, Tom, earlier when you mentioned another certain Irish striker, and I'll preface it by saying that he's had his struggles and he's come out and said that he's getting help for it now, which is incredible.
Yeah, very commendable,
very commendable for that. But I think there's a big difference now. Like, we look at Evan Ferguson as a professional to what Aaron Connolly and how Aaron Connolly's attitude was back then. But I don't want to take away from his struggles because that's a really hard thing to deal with. So I talk about his attitude in a professional setting, nothing else. So with Evan, I think he's a guy that's got his feet on the ground, knows that he's still young. He's had a lot of injuries to contend with at a really young age. He's maybe been thrown into it when he didn't expect to. And I think young players always do pick up little injuries like this if they're playing as much as what an Evan Ferguson is playing. What are he still 19, 20? So, we're talking about a really young player with so much of his career ahead of him, probably 15, 16 more years. So, in my opinion, we be patient with Evan. We wait for him to get a good run in the side. And when he does inevitably come back into the side and he doesn't score for 3 games, it's to not just completely write him off. Because that fans just expect it now that, Evan Ferguson's got 98 potential on FIFA. Why isn't he performing to that potential? Meh. Because he's a young human being. And, we can't put that pressure on him. If we do that, we will eventually see the best of Evan Ferguson again. If we play him alongside players that can amplify his game, like we've seen in the past when he's been paired with João Pedro, It's a very, very good pairing. So when he comes back, we need to give him the service, we need to give him the time, we need to give him the space, and eventually Evan Ferguson will come good again. We've seen what player he can be. That there is no doubt in my mind that player has just suddenly vanished. So yeah, it's just patience. Don't loan him out. Keep him.
Very, very well said, Joe. Just real quickly on Evan Ferguson, Ben, do you think that, and I'm sure other fan bases do this, Brighton fans were very guilty of doing it with Aaron Connolly, and certainly with Evan Ferguson, especially after his hat-trick against Newcastle last season, and then the touted £100 million price tag. Do you think we as fans have built him up too much? Bet more so than perhaps he has shown. I'm not saying he's a bad player. I'm just saying he's obviously a very good player, but he's sort of done it in fits and starts. But because he came onto the scene, he burst onto the scene with goals, that we've bigged him up in our heads. And then when he doesn't reach those lofty heights, we sort of write him off.
I see a little bit. I think, as you say, I mean, he was 18 and he was just seemed to be knocking away for fun. You think this guy's going to get 50 a season. You know, this guy is, I'm going to say, it was the new Erling Haaland. It was almost before Erling Haaland, wasn't it? But yeah, I think, you know, when somebody bursts in like that, I think it's also, you know, the thing with a player that's new, they can do that because nobody knows who they are. And I think sort of certain, you know, defenses will have looked at him and gone, geez, don't let that Irish kid do this. And so they don't. And so suddenly the goals that he was getting last week, he's not getting this week because the defense are ready for him. So I think, you know, again, that's a development in his game as well. That, you know, that he's got that, it wasn't like a one trick, but he had that shot on the turn that he just did it and it went in the bottom corner. Wherever, you know, wherever he was in the box, he turned and it would be in the bottom corner. And I think that's something that he was really good at, but teams learn to defend against. And so, yeah, I mean, his game's going to develop. You know, I think, as Joe said, you've got to look after the guy because he's still really young. He should be playing in the under-23s, really, shouldn't he? So, you know, there's players we were talking about, oh, let's give this guy a run out, who were older than him. So yeah, I think, you know, just look after the guy and we'll see him up to his best again because he's, you know, he's a unit. He's got a presence. He's got a great touch. He'll be scoring again one day.
100%. My 2 cents on it is that I think we've mismanaged Evan Ferguson. I think we've put too much pressure on his shoulders to be the backup for when Welbeck eventually gets injured. I think we don't have many number 9s at the club. I don't think Pedro is a number 9. He's a 10. He works better as the side along centre forward, a la, you know, Dennis Bergkamp, Eric Cantona, some of the, you know, names from the 90s that I could recall. I think we've put too much pressure on him. I think he should have gone out on loan to the Championship, a bit like Liam Delap. You know, build up those minutes at a level that's not as intense, that's not under the scrutiny of the press, because what we've got there, we've happened with Evan, is he's burst onto the scene, scored loads of goals, getting interviewed saying, oh, are you going to transfer allegiances from Ireland to England? And he's like, I'm a 19-year-old kid and you're asking me if I want to chuck in my birthright of being Irish to represent England. You've got people saying he's worth 100 million quid. And there we are going, oh, yes. And I get it. He was brilliant. He was young. He was fantastic. But we did the same thing with Aaron Connolly. Because he scored goals at this level, we sort of kept him as a backup instead of going, right, we've got Danny Welbeck, who's perpetually injured. What they should have done is they should have kept Dennis Undav and they should have loaned out Evan Ferguson either to the continent or to Championship League One. And I know people would scoff at that and be like, oh, he's too good for League One. But that's where players pay their dues. You know, they do it at the lower levels. Look at Patrick Bamford, you know, played really well in League One when he was on loan from Chelsea, then got taken out of MK Dons, I think it was, and got put into the Championship. I say Liam Delap, you know, scoring in the Premier League now, scored for fun last season in the Championship. So I think we've mismanaged him personally. And I think that's why he's picking up so many little niggly injuries. I think we've done the same with Jack Hinchelwood a little bit. And I love Jack Hinchelwood. He's one of my favourite players. But we've chucked him into the deep end and there's so much research out there that shows that young players pick up these injuries because they're not supposed to be playing such intense matches and accumulating so many minutes. So yeah, think we've probably done Evan a bit of a disservice. So I'm on team loan, but I think he should be loaned to a championship team, not a Premier League team. Get the eyes off him for a bit, let him just enjoy his football, find that touch again. And if we're not going to loan him out, play him in the under-21s. Let him find that joy of football again, because that's when strikers play the best, when they're enjoying it. If they're constantly feeling this pressure of the fans themselves, the coaches, he's not going to be able to score. So I think he's been overhyped. Very, very good player. But I think he needs to just have the eyes off him for a little bit. Send him to a championship team that's maybe, challenging for the playoffs. That's my 2 cents. It won't happen because the club will want to keep him around. But that's what I would have done with the value of hindsight. And we've got 2 more questions, both from Posy. One is about Valentin Barco, Joe, a player that we were absolutely thrilled about. Looked brilliant in the summer, if a bit iffy defensively at times. To everyone at Albion Obsessed's disappointment, he got sent out on loan. He hasn't really got any minutes while he's been there. There have been talks about him being brought back and then going out to Porto on loan. But Posy has said he would have them back in a flash. So, what would you do with Barco, Joe?
It's a very good question. I mean, there's no doubting the technique Barco brings, set piece deliveries, free kicks, stuff like that. He's incredible with the ball at his feet, can deliver across to wherever he likes in the box. So, but it's, again, another very young player that we have to manage and realize that if we do bring him in and he doesn't hit the heavy heights of what our fans expect, that he's not finished. He's Argentinian. No, I'm joking. So yeah, I mean, there's a few rumours that we're going to send him out on loan with a buy option, which for me seems absolutely ridiculous. I certainly think that's not a very good move by the club, considering we brought him in, haven't really seen him play competitive football for us. At least give him a chance. But again, it's one of those players that would you play him as an out-and-out left back? Probably not. Would you play him as a wing back? Yes. And we're not playing that system at the moment. So I think he's definitely a player for next season once we hopefully bring in Buscagli or Vitor Reis, get a pre-season under their belts, get our centre backs back, and have Fabian Hertzler play the way that he wants to set his team up. And as you've said so many times, Tom, we haven't seen that St. Pauli system that we were sold, really. And so I think given the players, Fabian Hertzler will set up that way, and Valentin Barco would be a huge asset to that system. But I don't think now is the right time.
That is fair. What would you do, Ben, about Valentin Barco?
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree. I think I don't know, because he's another sort of schoolboy, isn't he? Got thrown in, saw some flashes of brilliance and also a lot of vulnerability. And obviously the club were like, well, he's not quite ready, is he? So sent him out. And I don't know that bringing him back now, he might be a bit more ready, but probably not quite yet. I mean, and again, as Joe said, I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to be selling him because he's supposed to be this wunderkind, isn't he? So, we want to sort of bring him back as sort of a much more finished article from his nice little Iberian holiday, and just set him on the rest of the Premier League next year and see what he can do. But yeah, as Joe said as well, the system's got to be there. You've got to buy players to fit your system, and player systems suit your players. You can't have one or not the other. So we'd have to be playing a certain system that would fit his qualities, and I think we probably will do. But yeah, certainly don't want to lose him.
No, yeah. When the rumours of us putting a sell-on clause when we put to Porto, or an obligation to buy, I was like, no. So I hope that that's certainly not true. I really like the idea of him as a left wing back, and I was really excited in the summer because I thought we were going to play, the sort of the European way of 3-4-2-1, and we set that way up in Japan. And Barco looked really good as that sort of left wing back, left midfield hybrid. And I think, Michael, you've said it as well. Lamptey and Barco as wing backs, that would be just that could be a really potent combination. And part of me wonders if the reason we haven't seen that system is because we didn't bring in Matey from that Joe mentioned earlier, the centre back. I wonder if that's because we didn't bring him in, so Fabian didn't think we had the personnel to play that way. Perhaps, I don't know. That's just me spitballing. Just one more question then, chaps, as we close in on the 90-minute mark. Here's from Rodders. Do you think Fabian knows his first 11? I'm going to come to you, Joe, because you've shaken your head. What do you think?
I don't think so, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Because we've got such a plethora of attacking options and a packed schedule. Games coming thick and fast, lots of competitions. I know we're not in Europe, but we still got a lot to contend with. And I don't think, I think most Premier League managers will tell you there isn't a first 11. There is a squad, and you have to call upon your squad all the time throughout the season. So for me, that's sort of like a lost cause. I mean, it would be great to have 11 players that, we would start week in, week out, and they perform to their levels all the time. I think he's got his players that are the first names on the team sheet, but I don't think we will have a Fabian first 11. I think because of the talent that we've got throughout the squad, he would probably say in training that most people deserve to start. There's only 11 spots, so it's who trains the best in the week. So that's my view anyway.
Fair is fair. Ben, Rodder has followed that up with saying he keeps changing his team every week. Obviously, we've seen a phrase like Tinkerman used to describe people like Paolo Ranieri before. Does tinkering with the team every week, is that happening through necessity in your opinion, or is that because he can't settle on a first 11?
Well, kind of a bit of both, I guess. I mean, I think his problem is that he can't pick his first 11 because his captain's out, his vice captain's out. So he hasn't got Dunk at the back and Welbeck at the front, and I suppose you pick a team that you think is going to perform best against the opposition, don't you? As well, you want to play your game, but you've also got to deal with theirs. So I mean, I think he'd probably tinker a bit less if everyone was fit, but then I suppose he'd have the luxury of being able to tinker more. So I don't know. But as Joe said, you don't want to settle. There's always got to be competition for places. Every player that's on the field is looking over his shoulder at the three guys on the bench that are after his place, and that's healthy. That's really good. So, Igor was playing really well this week, but he has a shocker in training, and Abner Webster's shining. So Igor sits on the bench this week, and Webbo plays, and so that kind of thing. So I just got them on my screen. So those are the first two that came to mind. But that's managing the squad, isn't it? So. But certainly he could do without the injuries.
Yeah, I think injuries have been a big part of that, haven't they? Let's be honest here. I think he knows most of his 11, and I think the changes that he brings in are dependent on the opposition, and I think that's what good coaches do. I think we can all agree that Bart is the undisputed number one. I think in terms of playing a back four, Purvis, Van Hecker and Dunk are nailed on. It tends to be, for me, Veltman comes in when we're playing against, say, the big six, the teams where we perhaps need to be a bit more defensive, and Lamptey comes in when we can be perhaps expecting to be on the front foot a bit more. I think Balaba's nailed on. And I think that when he's fit, I think Mats Pfeiffer will be nailed on. I think Ayari has done a really good job of stepping up. But I think Mats and Baleba are going to be the pairing going forward, because I think that Mats is going to be really useful, because as Baleba bombs forward, Mats is going to sit. Because I think when we signed him, I looked at I read an article that said Mats was one of the last remaining number sixes, about this idea that he's as a single pivot player. And I think that he's going to be one of those players that he's going to drop into the back to make a back three. I can see that happening. And that would allow Baleba to push on forward into his more box-to-box role. So I think Baleba's nailed on. I think Mats might be. I think that when he's fit, Welbeck is also a nailed-on starter. And then it's just who you dot around. I think Mitoma is pretty nailed on unless he's knackered. And then it's between Pedro and Ruta. Gruder, who seems to be favoured on the right over Minter at the moment. So I think he's got players that he thinks if you're fit, you are definitely playing. But then there are other players that he'll pick depending on the opposition. We just haven't had a run, have we, where we've had been injury free. There's always been at least one person, first team player, that has had to miss out, unfortunately. So yeah, it's a good question. I do think it's a good question. But I think we've been unlucky with injuries for the second consecutive season, which has been a right pain. And I think it's also managing some of the players you have. I mean, look at Enciso. There's been a lot of rumbling about him being unhappy. Then he comes on, shoots from everywhere, and then suddenly seems to be a bit happier again. So it's keeping players happy, and that's going to be impossible with this, especially the attacking options we've got. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on it anyway. Well done, everyone. You've made it 90 minutes into this podcast.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. We very rarely go 90 minutes, but it's been nice chewing back with both you and Joe and Ben, and for you guys joining us on the live stream as well. But we will bring it to a close now. So well done if you did get this far. If not,
add on a few minutes for time wasting.
Very good, Ben. Very good. We can blame the officials, but as the officials are me and Joe, we can't really blame ourselves too much, because that would be silly. But no, thank you very much to Joe and Ben for joining me this evening. Thank you very much to the live viewers who have sent their questions in. Really enjoyable stream tonight, talking about 2 games, looking ahead to the FA Cup, a bit of January, and a bit of Q&A at the end. Joe, is that a hand up? This isn't class, my friend.
Teacher Tom. Can we just give a shout out to Mr. Ben and the guys over at She-Goals, the She-Goals podcast, which is very proudly powered by Albion Obsessed. They do amazing stuff. If you want to hear all about the Albion's women team and what Dario is up to with that squad at the moment, pushing for top 4, hopefully. Go and check them out at She-Goals on Twitter, Blue Sky, all that stuff.
The women have got the FA Cup this weekend as well. They're playing Durham at the Broadfield Stadium in Crawley on Saturday at 12:30. Tickets still available if you haven't got an away game at Norwich.
Ben is not being paid by Brighton and Albion Football Club to promote. Go and check them out.
Yeah. Thanks you so much, Ben, for your time this evening.
And thanks for having me,
guys. Go and check out the She-Goals podcast and all the amazing work those guys are doing over there. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Albion Obsessed content if you've not done so already. I mean, if you've not done so already, what are you doing with your lives, man? Subscribe so you can hear us chat absolute nonsense on pretty much a weekly basis. We love it. Wherever you may be, whenever you may be. We'll see you next time. Take care.